the places we call home, where we feel the safest, an unimaginable betrayal can sometimes occur. The people we trust the most, our families, can, in rare and haunting cases, become victims of our darkest nightmares. Today, we'll uncover the chilling stories of 5 infamous killers who turned against their own families. These aren't just tales of crime, they're tales of broken trust, hidden motives, and lives forever changed. Welcome to After Crime, where you always find true crime story. Behind every door, there's a story. In Frederick, Colorado, the Watts family seemed to embody the American dream. A loving father, a caring mother, and 2 precious daughters. But in August 2018, that dream turned into a nightmare, and the world watched as the man once known as a devoted husband became a symbol of betrayal. Today, we uncover the twisted tale of Chris Watts, a man who shattered the lives of those closest to him in the pursuit of a new beginning. Chris and Shanann Watts looked like the perfect couple. They married in 2012 and settled in Frederick, Colorado, where they built a life together. Shanann was a vibrant, energetic mother who often shared glimpses of her life on social media, showcasing family outings and her love for her daughters, Bella and Celeste. Chris, quiet and reserved, worked in the oil industry, while Shanann was a dedicated mother and businesswoman. Their life seemed picture perfect, but behind closed doors, there were cracks in the facade. Financial stress, communication issues, and Chris's growing distance were beginning to take a toll. By 2018, those close to Shanann noticed something was wrong. She confided in friends that Chris was becoming distant, cold even. Little did she know, Chris was having an affair with a coworker. He saw a way out, a chance to start over with someone new. For Chris, it became an obsession, and as the summer of 2018 progressed, his double life began to take shape. As Shanann traveled for work, Chris entertained visions of a different life. August 13th, 2018, would mark the last night Shanann, Bella, and Celeste would be seen alive. At around 1:48 a.m., home security footage captured Shanann returning from a work trip. Exhausted and unaware of the horror awaiting her, she stepped through the door. In a tragic, premeditated act, Chris took his wife's life in their bedroom. But the nightmare didn't end there. Their daughters, Bella and Celeste, woke up to find their mother gone, and their father, cold and unfeeling, preparing for what would become one of the most chilling family murders in recent history. In the early hours of the morning, Chris loaded his daughters into his truck, along with Shanann's body. They drove to a remote oil field where Chris worked. In an unspeakable act of betrayal, Chris ended the lives of Bella and Celeste before placing their small bodies into oil tanks. Shanann was buried nearby in a shallow grave. Later that day, a concerned friend reported Shanann missing. Police arrived at the Watts home, finding it empty, but noticing odd details. Shanann's car was still in the garage, and her belongings were untouched. Chris's behavior was oddly calm, detached, almost rehearsed. He played the part of a worried husband but gave conflicting statements, showing little urgency or concern. Scene: interview footage of Chris pleading for the return of his family. Days passed, and Chris even went on television, making an emotional appeal for his family's return. But to investigators, his act was beginning to crumble. Friends, family, and even his own father began to sense that something was wrong. On August 15th, Chris agreed to take a polygraph test, but the results were damning. It was clear he was lying. Faced with mounting evidence, he confessed to his father, revealing he had taken Shanann's life. Initially, he tried to shift the blame, claiming Shanann had harmed their daughters. But eventually, he admitted to the horrifying truth. Scene: police press conference, Chris's arrest. Chris Watts was arrested and charged with the murders of his family. The investigation laid bare the brutal details of his crime and exposed the chilling premeditation behind his actions. Why would a seemingly normal man commit such a monstrous act? Psychologists point to a mix of financial pressures, a desire to escape family responsibilities, and the lure of a new life with his mistress. For Chris, eliminating his family was a means to an end, a way to start over without facing consequences. It was a decision born out of selfishness and a complete disregard for human life. On November 6, 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to all charges, sparing him the death penalty, but ensuring life in prison without parole. The courtroom was filled with Shanann's family and friends, who listened as Chris admitted his guilt, closing the chapter on a case that left a deep scar on all who knew the Watts family. The case of Chris Watts serves as a reminder that sometimes evil can wear the mask of normalcy. A loving father, a trusted husband, beneath it all was a man who destroyed everything he claimed to love. In his pursuit of freedom, Chris Watts left behind only pain, heartbreak, and the haunting memory of what he took from this world. On a quiet night in Amityville, New York, one of the most infamous and chilling crimes in American history unfolded within the walls of an unassuming house on Ocean Avenue. A family of 7 went to sleep, but by morning, only one would remain alive. Now, we uncover the dark tale of Ronald DeFeo Jr., the man who committed a massacre in his own home. This is the true story behind the Amityville Horror. The DeFeos were, by all appearances, a typical suburban family. They had recently moved into a beautiful Dutch colonial house in Amityville, hoping for a fresh start. Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. was the eldest of 5 siblings, raised under the watchful eyes of his parents, Ronald Sr. and Louise. But beneath the calm, a storm was brewing. While Ronald Sr. ruled with an iron fist, Butch became increasingly troubled. Friends and neighbors noted his rebellious behavior, troubled by frequent arguments with his father. And as the years passed, Butch began to withdraw into a world of anger, resentment, and drugs. By his early 20s, Butch had become a fixture of local trouble, caught up in drugs, petty crimes, and explosive confrontations with his father. Behind closed doors, the DeFeo family was grappling with tension, fear, and Butch's growing instability. Little did they know that these conflicts would soon turn deadly. In the days leading up to the crime, friends noticed a change in Butch. He was agitated, unpredictable, and, as some would later recall, seemed to be spiraling deeper into darkness. November 13th, 1974, began like any other night in Amityville. But around 3 a.m., Butch picked up a rifle, stalking through his own house as his family slept. His father, mother, and 4 younger siblings, 2 brothers and 2 sisters, had no warning, no chance to escape. One by one, Butch fired into each room, leaving 6 members of his family dead. When the gunshots stopped, the once peaceful house on Ocean Avenue had become a scene of unimaginable horror. The next morning, Butch ran into a nearby bar, breathless and panicked. He shouted that his family had been killed, claiming he'd just discovered the scene. Neighbors and friends followed him back to the house, where they found the bodies, each family member shot in their beds, with no sign of a struggle. Butch quickly became the center of the investigation. At first, Butch insisted that his family had been killed in a mob hit, pointing to his father's connections and debts. But the story began to fall apart under police questioning. His nervous demeanor, combined with the lack of forced entry, led investigators to suspect that Butch himself might be responsible. Under intense interrogation, Butch's story began to unravel. After hours of questioning, he finally broke, admitting to the murders. He claimed he'd been possessed by a force, that voices in the house had commanded him to kill his family. It was a story that would haunt the public and give birth to the legend of the Amityville Horror. Butch's confession was as chilling as it was unsettling. He described the events in cold detail, revealing a level of premeditation that sent shockwaves through the community. The confession marked the beginning of the end for Ronald DeFeo Jr. Why would a young man turn on his own family in such a brutal way? Psychologists point to Butch's troubled relationship with his father, his drug addiction, and his fragile mental state as contributing factors. But Butch's defense would add another layer to the story. He claimed supernatural forces drove him to commit the murders, an account that would later fuel countless books, movies, and legends about the Amityville house. His story of hearing voices and seeing shadows in the house caught the attention of the media and the public, creating a narrative that blurred the line between crime and paranormal horror. But ultimately, the jury saw through this defense, attributing his actions to a blend of mental instability and deep-seated rage. The trial of Ronald DeFeo Jr. was swift, yet filled with shocking revelations. Prosecutors painted a picture of a troubled young man who saw his family as an obstacle, consumed by anger and possibly fueled by drugs. Butch's attempts to use insanity and paranormal forces as a defense fell flat, and the jury found him guilty on 6 counts of murder. In 1975, Butch was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms, ensuring he would spend the rest of his days behind bars. Despite appeals and attempts to overturn his conviction, the ruling stood, and he was left to face the consequences of his actions. After the trial, the story of the DeFeo murders took on a life of its own. The Amityville house became infamous as a place of hauntings, with future residents and countless writers and filmmakers weaving tales of horror and the supernatural. Although the story of Butch's brutal actions remains the dark core of the legend, it has since been overshadowed by the folklore surrounding the house itself. The case of Ronald DeFeo Jr. is a stark reminder of the terrifying potential for violence hidden behind closed doors. In a moment of rage and delusion, Butch shattered his family and left an indelible mark on American crime history. Today, we remember the victims of the tragedy and the shocking legacy left behind.